a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So reads the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Now, there are those like the NRA, most Republicans, and everybody in Texas who says that that means that every citizen has the right to keep and bear arms. Now, there are others like the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, most Democrats, and everybody in California who says, no, the purpose of the Second Amendment was just to guarantee the states the right to a militia, like a National Guard, never to give individuals guns. Now, since commitment to objectivity and honesty is essential to historical investigation, I'm just going to admit my bias just right up front. I am from Texas, and everybody here has guns. So, let's go to history and see, what did our founding fathers believe? How did we get a Second Amendment, and how did republicanism become linked with the right to bear arms? We could go back to Sparta and the citizen soldier, where every man had to be able to use weapons, and we could go to Socrates and Plato. But we're going to start at Machiavelli, who was the writer, the philosopher for the Florentine Republic, back about the time that Columbus was discovering America. And he took all that information and put it into a writing about the citizen warrior and how the citizen warrior was the real power behind the republic. He said that arms were necessary to liberty for a man's personal defense, so he could feed his family through hunting, to defend his country, to keep his government a servant and not a master. But the one that was most intriguing to me was to sustain a virtuous Republican character. Now, James Harrington, over 100 years later, added to the writings of Machiavelli the idea of personal property. Now, one of the tyrannies our founders rebelled against was Britain maintaining a standing army in America, fed by the crown with taxes taken from American landowners. And here's why. Harrington said that arms are necessary for liberty, but so is property. And here's his reasoning. Because ruling requires armies, whoever feeds the army will rule. If the land is in the hands of the people, then a stable republican government of the people will result. But tyranny results when the land and the arms are controlled by one or by a few. Daniel Defoe said all men would be tyrants if they could. The genius of our founding fathers were that they believed what the Bible said, that man is made in the image of God, but he is a fallen and sinful creature, and they constructed our government and our Constitution to take advantage of that reality. Trenchard and Gordon, in Cato's letters, said rulers must always be restrained. An unarmed populace merely encourages their natural tendency toward oppression. They say, men who are above all fear soon grow above all shame. James Burr added to this body of knowledge about the virtuous Republican character. He said the spirit is virile and the character of a nation is virtuous when the people have weapons and have the will to use them to defend their families, their property, and their republic. He said, quote, the possession of arms is the distinction between a free man and a slave. George Mason, who is called the father of the Bill of Rights, in the Virginia Declaration of Rights in 1776, said, people have a right to keep and bear arms. A well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. You can see that George Mason and the founders understood we have two individual liberties, but they are certainly interrelated. So here is their summary. The founders sought to protect two separate but interrelated rights. The individual's right to keep and bear arms, which they saw was necessary to maintaining liberty, but also the need for a militia to coordinate the efforts of those free men. It was interesting that the debate in the convention was over the problem of how to get guns into the hands of as many people as possible, not how to curtail their ownership or restrict them only to those serving in the militia. Dr. Timothy Dwight, who was the president of Yale, said that the hallmark of the Republic is the right of the individual to keep and bear arms. And the difficulty has been to persuade the citizens to get guns, not to prevent their violent use. So our founders saw that the ownership of guns and weapons was the citizen's right, and it was necessary for liberty, for defense of life, property, and the nation, and for a virtuous Republican character, and to keep the government the servant of the people.